this. So, hello, my name is Jean-Luc Pierite for Babydolls Public Access, the 2025 Indigenous Gulf Stream. This is our recognized stories. Today, with me, I have Kim Vaz DeVille, who is an educator, a researcher, an exhibit, a curator, a cultural activist, and one of our back home in New Orleans, one of our Babydolls, one of our cultural heroes, I would say, and also formally, currently a scholar in residence over at Dillard University. Kim, thank you for your time today. And yeah, I would like to get into the conversation. We've connected over here. I'm currently at North American Indian Center, Boston. We connected in Boston. Now you're back home in New Orleans. Um, and now we're looking forward to having the Institute for Collaborative Language Research either in 2028. We've submitted the application for that, and we'll try again for 2030 if not. But we came up on this idea of hosting it over at Dillard University, which is so special to me because I'm a former I am an alum of Dillard class of 2002. And I wanted to first start off our conversation reflecting a little bit about your background, and especially the language and culture preservation and revitalization piece. I know earlier this year, the Babydolls were taking up the Kurivini, the song tradition, back home in New Orleans, and so we definitely touch each other in those spaces. And so, yeah, I wanted to hear some of your personal reflections about revitalization and preservation.
Well, first, I want to thank you for inviting me into this conversation. And thank you for the work that the stream is doing. I was so happy to discover it. We have already done one collaborative project, which we can talk about toward the end. And as welcoming you back home to the Dillard family and the Dillard community. And we're all really excited about the work that's going to be possible with
Mhm.
all of your activities and Dillard, and making it a home for the kinds of
Mm.
Native studies and collaborative work, with people of color that we can do performances, we can do academic work, we can do healing and ritual work. And so we're really looking forward to that. So, everybody thinks that I'm a baby doll, but I am a baby doll researcher and a baby doll enthusiast.
Okay.
And when I was doing the research on this little known Black women's masking tradition that started at the turn of the 20th century, um, nobody had really been taking up that research and taking, poor Black women seriously. And I wanted to take them seriously. It was one of the few places where you could actually see Black women participating in Mardi Gras culture. Uh, there just weren't many spaces for Black people in Jim Crow New Orleans.
Mm.
There was a small group of people who were trying to revitalize the tradition, which had basically died out. And in order to understand the tradition, I did some participant observation, which is why I sometimes got dressed up in a costume and followed them around and ended up
Mm.
writing a book about them. And that's been well over a decade ago. But there was in 2023, the death of the last Kurivini speaking baby doll who was in her 90s. And while we were doing the second line funeral parade for her, I realized that there would be no baby dolls who could speak Creole. And the Babydolls used to sing these racy and risque songs in Creole because the baby
Mm,
doll tradition is all about turning everyday norms on their head. And so they didn't have to be, you know, polite, normative, acting, respectability, politicking people. They could wear short skirts, they could shimmy on down, and they could, you know, be assertive and independent on the public streets, which at that time people thought, you know, if you were on a public street, you must be a public woman. And so they were defying these stereotypes and they would sing these Creole songs. And so I had the idea that we needed to return Kurivini to the women who were carrying on this tradition. So we began last summer having workshops on the tradition, on songs and folklore. And none of them spoke Kurivini. And and so there was some trepidation about, you know, the first song that we did was Chermo Le Toi, which is that kind of Creole Mardi Gras song. Because it's like,
mm.
dear, I love you so much. And then if I ever cease to love you, I'm gonna cut my neck. I love you like a pig loves mud. And so, you know, within the language is the humor of the people, it's the passionate saying, you know, it's your passion coming out about, you know, whatever. This year we're learning another song called Tukatu, which was an African American man in the Treme who he was like the battle rap artist of today. He would sing
Mm,
about things that were going on in the community. So sometimes people, you know, who were light skinned enough, they would pass. And so this
mhm,
one woman actually sued for $10,000 in the 1800s people for saying that she was Black
mm,
because she was Black, but she was living on another part of the city. And so he made up this song about Tukatu, and there's no soap that could whiten you. And so they're learning these songs, and in learning these songs, they are also learning about the culture and the history, which because, as you know, Kuri Vini being a critically endangered language is like on, you know, it needs resuscitation, it's on life support. And so it contains the culture of the people. Kuri Vini is based on African linguistics. And
mm,
and so when you are saying some things like you know, in the language, you're actually sort of singing in the melody of the language of the African people who settled here in the 1700s. All of that
mm,
is lost if we don't record these songs. Also, there is a woman, you know, I found these songs in the archive, and there's a woman, Inez Catalan, and she inherited these home songs, as she said. She was a Afro Creole woman in the river parishes, and she would just sing the home songs because the women couldn't go into, you know, they couldn't go to the dance hall or Zydeco and sing. So they sang these risque songs for fun.
mm,
And so it was also a way of memorializing the women who created the culture, because her mother made up a lot of these songs. Her mother kept a lot of these songs, you know, going, and she passed them on enough for us to get them recorded. And so what we do is to, you know, the women become walking and living archives
mhm,
in the community.
mhm, mm. There's so much that we could do, that we could take this. I definitely, you know, so some of these stories, like, you know, it's just so interesting to me, like how our carnival tradition, like our histories are so embedded in the way that we costume and the way that we sing and the way that we dance and the way that we celebrate life. Just so it's just so like it's just so rich. It's more than going out and parade and making a spectacle and all of this stuff. There's just so much about like the preservation aspect and the holding on to that identity that's really that really interests me, because when you were talking about the Tukatu song, it brought to mind, we have a Creole elder out here in Boston, and she often would tell me stories about how, okay, if you get off of work, you have to like stay on the bus all the way until the end of the line, and then ride the bus back to where you actually live, because you didn't. That was part of like the survival tactic. Like, you didn't want people to know where exactly you live, and then they clock you basically.
Mhm.
uh so it's very interesting to me. Another thing that you had brought up in previous conversations, and I wanted to get your reflection on it, was just the the repatriation project that the community has been involved with. Um, Certainly there was like the process of repatriation of remains from Charity Hospital from Germany. But then there was the ceremonial aspect of like how we actually welcome those ancestors, those community members that were lost to us at one point. Now we were repatriating.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of get like a little bit more of your side of the story for that one.
Yes, I actually was able to attend the ceremony, and the community, the city, Dillard, culture bearers, they really put a lot of thought into how to honor these people. And they were very happy with the museum in Germany and how they sent the remains home. Each was in a separate box. They handmade flowers for each person. And during the ceremony, there was, drumming, people dressed up in white, which is an African way of memorializing the color, the color of the ancestors.
Mm.
And then the playwright, the professor who's a theater professor, did a beautiful script of saying my name, say my name. And all 19 names were said. They don't know exactly very much about two, but the 17, they knew where they lived from the census records. They knew their name. They knew about when they died. Some had only been in New Orleans one day when they died at Charity Hospital. Others had
Mm.
been living 20 years. And so they removed their heads and buried their bodies, and we don't know where the bodies were buried. So this was a gruesome spectacle, the way that, bodies could, that Black bodies had no value. Um, and so what the community did was to give these people not only their value, but a celebration of, what they help us to know, how they help us to know who we are and what life was like for them during that time. And so I pulled up some quotes by Dr. Monique Guillory, who's the president of Dillard,
Mm.
because this was an extremely important reparation for her. She declared um, the day that we had the ceremony, repatriation day at Dillard University. And she said they were stripped of their dignity. They were people with names. They were people with stories and histories. Some of them had families. Some of them were mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, but they were all human beings. She said it's not about bones and artifacts. It's not only about injustice. It's about restoring in many ways for us here and celebrating our humanity. It's about confronting a dark chapter in medical and scientific history and choosing instead a path of justice, honor, and remembrance. And we will do so in the most sacred way we know how, in true New Orleans fashion, with a jazz funeral. It did have a jazz band and African drumming as well, to show the world that these people matter, that they belong here and their home. So, you know, we also have here in New Orleans a tomb of the unknown slave, which is a large metal or large pieces of iron that were reclaimed from the Mississippi River. And
Mm,
the parish priests at St. Augustine Parish brought that cross, that brought that to, you know, Treme, and put that cross there to remember that Treme sits on the ground in which our ancestors are buried. Your ancestors, our ancestors, their sweat, their blood, and nobody names them. We don't, you know, they were not named. In many cases, they were just a number. They were just about the number of what they were worth. And
mm,
so in Treme to, you know, reclaim their peoplehood and their personhood, it's, you know, it's the same thing. And there is a lot of memorializing in Black culture. Uh, there are these routines, typically of people, African Americans, putting on T-shirts at the repast, or you know,
mm,
the jazz funeral of the person. They'll have
mm,
life-size cutouts that they'll carry of the person. They'll have flowers arranged in, if they like red beans and rice, or if they like beer or whatever they like, you know. And then musicians will have signs, not signs, memorial pictures, like if it's a trombone or, you know, a
mm,
tuba especially, they'll have the pictures of, you know, that they do the genealogy work of the people who've passed on, the band members or the family members, and they'll go where they used to live, and, you know, and
mm.
they'll pour some libation. And even the Black masking Indians, I have begun to see them doing their own archival work in their suits of putting pictures of the chiefs who died, and they're
Mm.
all they are walking archives. You know, I mean, like our people believe in memorializing and never forgetting, and our ancestors are alive with us here. I think is the overall message.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that brings so much up. Like you know, it for I would say for the first, well, it was for the first 12 years, go by all the dates and everything, for the first 12 years of my life, I was in a world before the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. Um, and it was part of that history was the story from my tribe about how a grave robber came, you know, our sacred objects, but our human remains as well were brought up here to the Harvard Peabody Museum, and then they got bounced around for about 20 years until 1989, when they were finally repatriated. And I, you know, because that story is so foundational, because that was something that my grandfather and his generation went through, um, it astounds me, like hearing still like this long journey that we've all been on, in terms of like Native people fighting to have their ancestors liberated from these archives, when we're talking about medical and science research and stuff, or whatever field. You know, there's so many academic fields that have benefited off of our bodies. um and then thinking about, you know, beyond us, like, what are the mechanisms that we could all be using so that we can reclaim this history, regardless of whether we're indigenous or Afro-Indigenous or Black or Creole or whatever it is, just whatever community we're from. Like, there's so much of us that still kind of out there that we need to bring back home. So I just really think I really think about that stuff, and um I like how you frame the walking archives. Um just thinking about like how we're not necessarily like boxes on shelves and in dusty collections. Like, we bring that out,
Right.
we bring that out for everybody to see. So I just wanted to yeah, I guess I don't really have a question, but I just kind of like, I just wanted to sit with that for a little bit about like, maybe like, what is it that, after going through all this process, having like all of this ceremony and everything, what are things that we probably need to do more within our communities to be able to reclaim and liberate all of this history and all of these ancestors?
Well, I had a chance to work with Ida and Haley and oh man, she cooked our makshu.
Oh
and
boy.
and we had African American and Native American, especially the south western or southeastern Indian um, aesthetics. And we came together to study African aesthetics and Southeastern Indian aesthetics, and we called it dialogue, doodling, and desserts. And so uh, Juan Pardo, who had been working with a weaver using the she's Shreveport. Tell me what are what I'm thinking cane, I'm thinking uh,
Mm,
the weaving, the materials for weaving.
mm,
Anyway, her weaving of baskets made it into his suit as a collaboration. And
okay.
so we talked about Andinkra symbols from the African side and the messages that they say. And then from the Choctaw side, we talked about tattoo symbols. And then we had
Yeah.
this conversation and display of Black Native collaboration in a particular suit. So those are the kinds of things that, and we had it at Dillard, and that I hope, and we called it New Alliance. It's like we walk together. Let's meet each other anew, and let's walk this path of healing, of creativity together. And that's what I'm hoping that you'll find at Dillard monthly, some way that, we are collaborating through, that we are using the best in our culture, our imaginations, to think of ourselves otherwise and elsewhere, not hemmed in a system that's designed only to extract our labor and our souls. And
Mm,
so, there are so many things that we can do together as a community. Dillard has a theater, so there's everything that we can do theatrically. They have an art gallery. There's everything we can do. There's space for music. There's space for cooking. There's space for learning.
mhm.
I see the possibility of having all of the archival material from the stream being a digital humanities course at Dillard. This is another thing that we can do together. to create a different kind of space. I have heard, and I am not a scientist, but I have heard that people have been planting lavender in places where the soil is really, really bad. And there's something about the lavender, that helps to regenerate that soil. So
Mm,
I see the kinds of practices that we can do together, eating together, cooking together, drawing together, weaving together, beading together, singing together, praying together are things that we can do. They don't cost anybody anything. We can
mhm.
come together and do that.
Yeah, I there's okay, so there's two threads because you had mentioned Juan Pardo, and I had um I had met with him briefly when he was up here, and he was talking about his environmental justice work, particularly with Bayou Sauvage. And then I was talking to him about how my uncle Joe Madere, who went by the name Alligator Joe, was like I believe one of the founders of sort of the efforts over there. And he was like, "Oh yeah, we hear stories about Alligator Joe and everything," and I kind of where I'm kind of taking this is this idea of the conversations that we have with each other, like the split cane basketry, I believe is what you were talking about, and how that was integrated into his suit. Um, and how we're really good at mapping stuff, I believe. Like, you were talking about the genealogists earlier, and I think that, when we start to listen to each other and we start to hear like names come up, it's like, oh yeah, I know that because we do what I think we do in Native community, which is like the cousin check, right? You gotta like make sure.
Right.
You're that family. Okay, then you must be or you're that tribe. Like you must be at X, Y, and Z. And I think like that's for all of us. Like we're all kind of like innately genealogists because we all kind of have this value attached to like archives and documentation and everything. Um, and it's surprising to me like when the Pope got announced, like it took us, an hour, and people were like, "Oh yeah, his family was from the Seventh Ward," Like, it's just so amazing, like how
Brings us back to Tukatu.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We no, yeah, we absolutely know. Well, and that's the thing. Like there were people that would ask him, okay, well, do you identify as black? And if he's gonna say no, but we're like, yeah, he's gonna say no, but like this is his connection. Like, like it's still like it's undeniable what the
It
connection
is.
is. The identity is like another thing, but the connection is like where we really kind of like get into it. Um, so I really appreciate that about like all of our folks in the Gulf South about working with archives. In terms of like curriculum over at Dillard, like what is it to be able to support like fostering those types of connections with like archival research and especially when it comes to like cultural or linguistic revitalization, like are there classes that are needed? Certainly, like we talk about like programming and stuff, special events and ways to connect with community, but are there things that we could perhaps like help grow over at Dillard?
Oh, absolutely. The ground is so fertile. And
Mm,
as Dillard reimagines itself with its ninth president and only New Orleanian president,
mm,
she is open. And we have had some of these conversations, especially about offering Kurivini, offering a First Nations language, especially one, that's here in our area,
mm,
offering it online so that people from who want to register can get, academic credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
Or if we want to do a special workshop series, those are all things that we want to have further conversations about. Just, we have, the language is so vital and important that we have to grow the language aspect of it. Even if we do it through song, like we're doing it with the Babydolls, and they have fallen in love. We did a new song called Marie Mahi Marie, which is literally Marie dead, in Korean, Marie dead. But it's a poem that was written by a man named Pierre who lived in St. Martinsville Parish, and he was enslaved. And they found his poem in a mix of Creole poems. And he sings this song. He's like, "Oh, little bird, why are you jumping around? Why are you flying around? Why are you happy? Don't you know that Marie is dead? You don't need to make a soft pallet for us in the grass anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Marie is gone. The world is still happy, but I am not happy. I am sad. Don't you know that Marie is dead?" And this is the kind of message that we could never get in English about an enslaved person writing about the loss of a love, you know. And so they are over the moon about this song. And
Mm-hmm.
when you were talking about the idea of, you know, symbolize, bringing our ancestors along with us, and as we play and as we mourn, um, the society says we don't belong, we don't matter, we don't see you. And I think that this is a gut and kind of primal reaction to that erasure, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to say, "I'm here, here's a picture of me. Here's a picture
Mm-hmm.
of, the person that I come from, and that person and who they come from." And so I think it's an intervention, in the absence, and the place of lack, where they say that we're not, we say, we assert that we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very that erasure is something that we all like, and I think that it has been such a part of our lives that kind of normalized, and we have internal scripts um that we have to overcome. Certainly, like, me growing into adulthood, like, I had to kind of overcome a lot of the stories about being native in Louisiana, and not fitting, like, somebody's perception of who a native is because my hair doesn't look a certain way, or because of whatever. Is there's so much that we have internalized because we have been told that we are lesser than. And yet, as we said earlier in the conversation, like, the academia at this on the other hand, like, extracts from us a lot, and we have been dispossessed. And so now we're at a point where the community's coming together. If we can learn from each other, and not in an extractive way, but in a reciprocal way, in a way that forms connections. um just thinking about, like, the diversity, like beyond Kurivini and indigenous languages, we have, like, Isleños, and we have oh goodness, yeah, of course, Louisiana French, and all
Vietnamese.
all you can go through all the communities that we have,
That's
like
right.
Tagalog. Is I want to hear more from, like, our Filipino relatives in Southeast Louisiana. And I what in your vision of, like, that coming together moment where we're able to, like, reciprocally share knowledge, what does that look like?
As you were speaking about people, all of us are tied to Catholicism. That
Mm-hmm.
is another really huge, it doesn't matter, if you come from the East or Africa or the West, when you get here, it's because somehow the Catholic Church has had an intervention in your life. And there are spaces where we can come together around spirituality. Um, and that is such a complex web because there are those spiritual communities that still are aligned, with Catholicism. There are those who have broken away and are no longer aligned and are reclaiming, the spiritualities of the people, in their homeland. And so I think spirituality is one area where we can walk, another area where we can walk with each other, coming together with our coming together to witness each other's spiritual rituals, to hold that space for them as they do that, and we are their witnesses. um that's one place, because as I think about, I've been right. I just finished this book on Norman Francis, who, for
Hmm.
people who don't know who that he is, he was he's very much alive, an Afro Creole from Lafayette, Louisiana, who went to Xavier University of Louisiana, another historically Black college, and was president for 47 years. Now, the thing that I have focused so much on him was when he went, it was before Vatican II, before, the Catholic Church said Catholicism should look like the people, should at least be reflective of the people in the communities that they're serving. This was a time when Catholic formation was Roman Catholic formation, and it was one size fits all. But there was such an emphasis in Catholic education on catechism, on formation, that he himself was probably one of the most formed Catholics. In fact, one of the priests who I interviewed, who was a priest and chaplain while he was there, said he was thoroughly Catholic.
Hmm.
And it's not that he didn't welcome, interfaith groups. It was just that what happens in a formation, I have come to understand, is that faith is hope, and
Hmm.
faith is optimism. And so every day you're kind of, we can, even irrespective of whether we believe in a supreme being or not, if we return to a place of faith and hope and optimism every day, you're kind of ingraining that in your worldview. And then
Hmm.
if you have to go to a place where you have to love my neighbor when your neighbor's getting on your nerves, and you have to, and you have to learn to hold your tongue, say it
Hmm.
diplomatically, find a workaround, but still be respectful of the person as person. That is what formation is. And so I think that that's what spirituality gives us. It gives us a kind of a way of forming ourselves in the world to be hopeful and respectful toward others. And I see that as another place that we can all come together on.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, you're talking about you're talking about not getting along with your neighbor. I started singing "Set Your Ass on Fire."
That's right. That's right.
Right? Yeah. It's yeah, no, that's really that's all of that is super important. And like Dr. Francis, I know that he was goodness, he's still with us. He was recognized most recently. I also think, you know, th- I kind of I had my experience was like growing up in New Orleans, and then I went out into America. And I say that because like I have this concept of Catholicism that's like around the fellowship that we had in New Orleans.
Mhm.
Um, and from that, like, even like thinking about like Xavier and thinking about Catherine Drexel and thinking about like, the educational mission that she set out, like how that it's very like distinct from the experience of the rest of the country, the rest of North America, because like we deal with residential schools and boarding schools and the things that the Catholic Church did, but it's I think it's very different in Louisiana and New Orleans. So
Yeah, there's a kind of openness in the Catholicism here that doesn't exist in other places. And
yeah.
as I was reading, because I had to read things around the formation of Black parishes after the passage of um, Plessy versus Ferguson. And
Hmm.
that was a big controversy over whether or not to establish Black parishes. But once they did establish a Black parish, those bishops were like so annoyed because Black people would go in there and light those candles, and they're like, all we want to do is go in there and light those candles.
It
It's like, yes, fire is very important to,
is.
an indigenous way of worshiping.
Yes,
And
yes.
so even though they tried to eradicate that, it
Yeah.
did not go as they planned.
Yeah, we love our candles, we love our relics.
Yes,
I know that.
absolutely.
I know that. Well, we're talking in June. The Indigenous Gulf Stream is we're going to be airing in November. Is there anything between now and then, because we have our artists for Stories of the Making that will be watching this and responding. So is there anything upcoming for you that we might want to include for that artist to look into?
Yes, on August 31st at Dillard at 4 p.m., the Babydolls will be having a recital of their Creole songs.
Oh my goodness.
And free and open to the public.
All right.
And so that's one thing. And then we're also with Columbia University, we're going to have something called Creole Futures, and the Babydolls are going to uh, teach a song that they've learned. We're going to have a conversation about, what is Corrivini, especially what, the African parts of Corrivini and what it teaches us about Afro-Creole culture. Um,
Mhm.
there will be dancing and umbrella making in November for that particular event. And that will be free and open to the public as well. And that will happen at Dillard. So those are two things that are coming up.
Wonderful. I really wanna I really if when is the Creole Futures again?
Well, in November,
In November.
yes, we haven't finalized a date, but it will be in November. But
Okay.
I'll be able to have a date for you soon.
Okay. We'll by the time this airs, we'll know what that answer is.
Yeah.
So
So
all
that'll
right.
be fun. And, another time for people to come in, and not just observe, but to get involved.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So, with that, Kim, I just wanted to thank you once again for your time today. Looking forward to airing this interview. Looking forward to the artists who'll be responding with their piece for Stories for the Making. And yeah, I want to just say, for the on behalf of a bunch of public access, we look forward to more ways in which we can work together and grow together.
Same here. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You too.
Bye.